Welcome to the Labour Force. I'm Bongeni Mutwa. A major shake-up of legislation to protect vulnerable workers, especially domestic workers, is on the cards following the adoption of the Compensation of Injury on Duty Amendment Bill by Parliament last week. Once signed into law, the bill will ensure that millions of domestic workers in the country are covered by the Compensation Fund for any workplace injury or illness. The proposed legislation also aims to extend benefits to an expanded definition of dependents, including spouses of domestic workers, their children, siblings, parents, and even grandparents in line with the country's cultural norms. Workers in the security sector and mining will also benefit from the new law, as diseases and post-traumatic stress disorder arising from the workplace will now be included in the new Compensation Fund regulations. To discuss this further, I'm joined by COSATU's Parliamentary Coordinator Matthew Parks, who of course is no stranger to the show. Matthew, it's always a pleasure to welcome you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having us.
Well, just to recap quickly how we got here, of course, there was that unfortunate incident that happened back in 2012 when a domestic worker by the name of Maria Mahlangu fell into a pool and drowned at her workplace. The employer was present in the house. Inside, she said she didn't hear anything. She found her floating in the pool later on. When her children tried to claim some benefits from the Compensation Fund, they were told they could not because she was not registered and she had not been paying any contributions to the fund. The matter went all the way to the Constitutional Court, which ruled that this shake-up is necessary in the social security net for domestic workers and other vulnerable workers. And here we are now. The question is, how soon can domestic workers, especially, expect to see these benefits?
Yes, look, I think, to be honest with you, I would expect it in the middle of 2022. The National Assembly has now passed it. It must now go to the National Council of Provinces. I think they would get done with it by around Easter next year. There's only about 2 months left in the parliamentary calendar this year. It will take a few months for them to process it next year, but I think they can be done by around April next year. We could then need to go to the President for him to sign into law, for government to publish it into law, and to get this ready. So I think from around mid-2022, it should be coming into effect. And as COSATU, we will be pushing Parliament and the Presidency and the Department of Labour to get this ready, to speed and make sure it happens quite soon. As you said, it's long overdue. It's taken more than 3 years to get the bill from NEDLAC to Parliament. But we're quite pleased the National Assembly has adopted it. It's a very progressive bill. It will benefit domestic workers, as I said. It will benefit mine workers, security guard workers, many of the workers who are exposed to violence or occupational diseases. But also, I think it will benefit women workers who are often subject to sexual violence at the workplace and suffer from post-traumatic stress. So there are many positive parts to it.
Now, of course, it's all well and good and it's very necessary and important, but someone has to pay for this. Who's going to pay for this? Is it the state, the government? Is it the employers of domestic workers? Is it the domestic workers themselves who are going to have to now pay in or have some deductions from their meager wages? Who is going to pay for these benefits?
So it follows the existing funding model for the Compensation Fund, which is an employer contribution. So the employer of the worker pays for the contribution to the Compensation Fund. So it doesn't come from the worker's salary. It doesn't come from the state either. It comes from all employers. So it's existing funding rules. It is quite affordable. It's quite sustainable. But what was critical to making sure it's sustainable is for all employers to register their workers and to contribute payments which are due on behalf of their workers. To have that mass contribution, it provides sufficient liquidity for the Compensation Fund to give the workers what they're entitled to.
Now, for those employers out there, I mean, there's a lot of people who employ domestic workers, and some of them may try maybe to get themselves around this. What kind of penalties does this law provide in terms of the employers who fail to comply?
Essentially, it provides for financial penalties that the employer will be fined if they don't comply. The worker has got the right to report them to the Department of Labour inspector, the compensation fund, who will take action. The bill strengthens the capacity and the powers of the labour inspectors from the department to issue compliance orders requiring the employer to register the workers and giving them a limited time frame within which to do it. But the penalty will be stiff fines, and that is quite critical to making sure that all employers do contribute and do register the workers. We saw last year with the lockdown how critical it was to make sure all workers are registered with the UIF, for example, so that there's sufficient resource to provide the necessary solidarity and relief to workers in the moment of need.
Well, now, of course, before I let you go, on the issue of mine workers, there have been stories over the years that people leave villages, go to the mines, they work there, then they get sick with lung diseases, they are incapacitated, they are forced to go back to the villages, they don't get compensation or enough compensation. If they die, their dependents get nothing. Is this now going to be a thing of the past?
We hope so, because this is quite critical, because many workers, as you said, in the mining industry suffer years later from asbestos, poisoning, lung cancer, horrific diseases, which cannot be apparent when they're working or immediately after they retire or resign from the workplace, but which become quite apparent afterwards. So this will enable those workers to claim. It provides for a greater claim period of up to 3 years when workers want to submit their claims, so it gives them more space to do so. It also gives, if the worker passes away, the money due to them would go to their dependents, the spouses, the children, or whatever dependents they might have. And it provides for an expanded definition of dependents as well. So it's quite useful on quite a variety of fronts to give more recognition to workers for the diseases they suffer, give them more time to claim, and give more scope for the benefits to be given to the family members if they pass away.
Wonderful. Matthew Parks, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you very much for making the time to talk to us as usual. We wish you luck, you and all your colleagues out there in the labour movement. We are trying very hard to improve the lives of the working class in South Africa. That's how we leave it. More news with my colleague, Nompumelelo Siziba, at the top of the hour. Your weather details up next. It's good afternoon from me.